this is kind of a cool impromptu setup. Like the hotel rooms are just not put together to set the podcast up. So we're literally in the lobby of the hotel.
Yep.
I'm out here with my buddy Joe and my other buddy Jake from In Extremis Performance. And we've been out in DC for a couple days doing some training, some firearms instruction with some peeps.
Yep.
It's been a good time.
It has been a good time. Today was day 3 down?
Yeah. Today is day 3.
Yeah, day 3.
What's not a good time is this heat and this humidity.
Yeah, dude, that wasn't cool.
Dude, I'm not built for this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we get it a lot.
I think it's perspective. To me, I'm like, it feels like the sun's out, but somebody left the AC on.
Yeah. I do think it's not as bad as Texas, but it's still today. There was a point where I went to wipe my face and my sleeve was soaked, and I was like, whew.
Yeah,
it's humid.
We're dripping out there. Like there's no evaporation going on at all. No. But that said, what a cool couple of days just in terms of some of the stuff we've seen. I wonder what you guys' take is on, again, working with a couple of teams up here, sort of some various backgrounds of people. And I have some takeaways. I wonder kind of what yours are to this point. I mean, we still have another day here, but.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I think they've been extremely professional. I think that they've had a great attitude, mindset. I've appreciated. I feel like they've had a very open mind.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not like they, some of them get more training than others, but they've had training before. So we came in, and I think they could have been very close-minded and been like, hey, we're cool or whatever, and said, go pound sand. But they've had a great attitude. I think that they've been very respectful, but I also feel like they've really challenged themselves. I think that's another one for me, and I'm curious here on yours, Joe. I feel like some shooters come into the class and they stay comfortable. They don't want to break out of that mold. Mm-hmm. And I think they've done a good job of allowing the target to be messy, but then listening, how do I diagnose it? How do I fix it? And then they go apply it. I think they've been super coachable. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a good trip. I think tomorrow will be good as well, but what do you think?
Yeah, what do you think, Joe?
So I think the good thing about this class is a lot of people are putting themselves out there, mostly because a lot of training tends to be inbreaded, right? It stays in-house. You're lucky if you get to send somebody out. Mm-hmm. They'll come back in, and or they go scout somebody, say, hey, this guy's good, let's bring him back. But a lot of people sometimes don't always allow it. So having somebody come into your house, you always have something to prove, but the fact that they're just like, hey, this is behind the curtain, this is what I can produce, help me produce more and be better at it, and to being vulnerable by actually taking good corrective criticism, which goes a long way, because we're giving them tools to use for the problems later on that they're going to be able to solve. And then those problems might be somebody else's problems. So they're like, hey, this is what I took. This is my medication. It might help you out. And then they're just going to be able to self-diagnose and teach people. So the fact that they're actually like open and vulnerable, right, I think actually applies to them being professional to take that corrective criticism. Because I think sometimes the thing about this industry is a lot of people don't like corrective criticism because they take it as an attack.
Yep.
And that's not always it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys nailed a lot of really great points. I think one of the things that I think sets these guys up for the success that they've had in all the ways that you guys just described is the leadership team that helped put this together for them. I think that definitely has a lot to do with it, and them being proactive and getting their people something a little different, something that might be beyond that inbred stuff that they're continuing to see. And some of it is with the guys that have been around for a long time and a lot of good feedback. Like, I think initially when you walk into these things, this has always been my experience just from the outside looking in as a student of the game, and what you'll typically see is, on day one in the first couple hours, everybody's kind of sizing one another up. And
sure.
It's a little bit of, I didn't get a lot of that, maybe right from the get-go. And then I did have a couple of guys, maybe some more of the advanced guys, come up at the end of the first day and go, hey, man, that was really good. And they were kind of maybe a little surprised.
Yeah.
But then by the end of the day two, they're just, man, thank you so much. Like, I learned so much. Like, I got to admit, like, when we first got started, wasn't really sure how this was going to work out or how, where this was going to go. But God, seeing day two come together with day one now, I get it. And this has been really helpful. And the bigger part was for me, we can kind of move on from this, but bigger part for me was what a couple of them said about being able to take it away and now knowing how to practice.
Yeah.
Rather than just come to a training, and to get some information, but being taught how to diagnose the challenges that they might be having in their own stuff, but also in other people's stuff from watching it from the outside because of the practical application of kind of the teach back from from the people in the line as you're pairing them up or whatever. So
Yeah.
anytime you can have that kind of an impact on folks, just in terms of what they can take away to then again apply to get better and knowing actually how to do that.
Yeah.
From a base level,
I think that's
powerful.
a huge, and I think honestly, the industry, we're starting to see a shift in that, in my opinion.
Agreed.
I think that some people are better about how they communicate that than others. I personally am very proud of us collectively as a cadre group, that I think that we are very studious and students, in my opinion, of how we look at it. I think there's been some guys that have really spearheaded the whole like process-driven approach, and I think that we've embodied that and really tried to build that process. So when we go teach, I think we do a good job of building those relationships, like we were just talking about offline or before we got on air, of building those relationships, and I think they see that we genuinely do care.
Yeah.
When we share that process, and I think when they see it live and they're diagnosing things, and I think it's amazing. The like aha light bulb moments where people are like, "Oh my gosh!"
Right.
Like I have not looked at it this way, and they're. I mean, you see it before your eyes. They're figuring things out, and you're like, "Holy crap! This is," you know what I mean? Like this is amazing. And I think that's just on the shooting side. Like then we get to the moving stuff that is 100% ours, that we've developed and built out, and I think then it's like, mind blown kind of thing. But I think the impact that we've seen from this. It's just awesome. It's humbling for me not being a cop. Yeah. Obviously, Joe, super appreciative of you being a cop and being involved in this, because I think it's super important. It's an important piece of the recipe, right? I don't need to be out there with a doctor running around telling cops, here's what this is, right? Like
how to be a cop.
Yeah, how to be a cop, because I'm not a cop. But I think that's the important piece. And I think anytime we teach these classes, whether it's you, Preston, or Sal, or any of the other guys that are cops, it's just like a combo that I think we just do a really good job, and it resonates, is I would say the word.
Yeah, I think when people come to class, they're kind of guarded, right? I got to validate you, and also how are you going to come at me? Because sometimes the culture can be, I'm here to tell you how you're wrong and your problems. Here's how I'm going to fix you, but I don't know how to fix myself. And right, a lot of people are critical on their own. You can tell me one thing, but I'm going to take back 5 things that I could have done better, right? So if you can show me how to make my things better, I think in the long run, then I'm going to take back from it. So whenever they see us in class, whenever they see you talk, especially you, Jake, they're like, this guy's showing me I have deficiencies and I have problems, but he's not here to just point them out. He's here to help me fix my problems and help me work through them when he's not here. Because when I'm at work, when I'm in front of something, that's that moment, but the rest of my life is mine. So how can I better it by spending good quality time with what I need to pay attention to? So I think that's one thing. They're actually, once they validate you, once that guard comes down, like this guy is just not taking shots at me. He's actually helping me point out things I didn't realize. And then he gave me what I need, the formula to just critique myself as I go in my own space. Then I think they're like, all right, cool. It tends to be like, this is a positive thing and let's just keep rolling. And then they're hungry. Right? They want more, they want to go, and then they pull us offline and ask side questions, which are very important. So the fact that they can pull us offline and just have a general conversation like, hey, I'm in your neck of woods, where's a good spot? And or, hey, I did this, what do you think? It's all different, but they're the same because they actually care. Hey, I want your input on what we're doing. Also, I care about your input as a person, not just as an instructor.
Yeah, man, that's so important. I was just kind of thinking through this, and I've talked about with you guys and other guys just about like training versus practice, instruction versus coaching. Yeah. And, I think about this like with what these guys, what people get when they go to a course or a class, and that is you can give them all the ingredients on what to put in the cake. But if you're not actually teaching them how to bake the cake, there's a lot of things that go into baking a cake. Now, I don't bake cakes, but I have baked a few, and I've seen a few get baked.
Pretty sure they're great.
And and I've had, what I've also had? I've had a lot of shitty cake, a lot of shitty cake. And I've had really, really good cake, which is how I know how shitty that other cake was. Yeah. And a lot of it, again, it comes down to the quality of ingredients, how those ingredients were prepared, and how they were kind of brought together at the right timing, with the right amount of heat, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's the nuance that comes with coaching for a long time and understanding the things that you just pointed out there, Joe. And that, and if you can get a student, part of this is the student and how they're taking on that information. So if they're coming into it with eyes open, but not just eyes open, like maybe there's a different way to bake this cake.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, you'd be surprised at kind of what you might get out of it as a student. And I know that. And again, that's a lot about what I talk about. Is just like this journey has been learning how to take the things like you mentioned and walk away. And then also have the ability to go, well, I understand how this works. Let me put a little, you said this word earlier, flair into it.
Yeah.
Like my own personality, or, my own take on this. Let me try this and experiment with this a little bit. And you'll find out, as you just said, it's right there in front of you. It's right there on paper, man. Like you can figure out whether it's working for you or not.
Because I think it's like we always say, right? It's not the way, it's a way.
Yep.
And if you can make that your way, yours, and it works for you, it might work for somebody else. Because I can be online and talk in front of 20 people, 100 people, 2,000 people. It doesn't matter. People receive things differently. There might be 4 people that I need to say it 4 different ways. It doesn't take anything away from one that he'd understand what 2, 3, and 4 did. But the point is I still need to reach him because one's still important. Same thing as 3 and 4. So knowing how to communicate, and we're reading everybody, we're reading the room. So I'm talking and I can see something's going on over here, but I can't address it, but Jake picks that up. And then he can slightly pull aside. That person doesn't know he was singled out, but he knows he needs help and doesn't know how to ask it in the right way. But then we could just fill in those gaps because we're paying attention, because we actually care. Because what you're doing here is beneficial to everybody, but at the end of the day, it's beneficial to you. How you perform your job, how you get home, and the people that matter care about how you do your job. And at the end of the day, if we're being selfish, like selfish plug for me, what do I get out? I get out of it knowing that you're going to be in a better place because I felt that we got each other and you're going to move on to do great things. And also selfish plug for me, I got to practice my skill set that much more with good people. And it's going to be applied every day at work. So it just pans out on both ends.
So I think that's a whole nother part and a really great place to transition, just with understanding like the population of people that are being trained and how they're getting that information and who they're getting it from. And so, Jake obviously, made mention of you being a cop, and that is important when it comes to maybe providing a little bit more context, or again, like the when you're putting that cake together, like the why we do it this way kind of thing. So don't just take the ingredients and throw them in the bowl and try to make the cake. Like understand why you're doing it. So you put a little bit more care into it, a little bit more thought into it. So let's just sort of transitioning into that and what you just said there, which is interesting. I don't know if anybody, actually, we had Sal on the show and he was very passionate about giving back to law enforcement and how important he knows that is. And if there's just one thing he can help somebody, is what he said. One thing that helps somebody do the thing better when it really matters, like that's what matters to him. That's why I was getting into it. Now, so I get that about you too, Joe, in kind of a different way. But so as people are listening to you talk that may have never heard you talk before, there's definitely a deeper level of understanding with how to coach people.
Right.
So you have a journey. We haven't really talked about it. Let's talk about it.
Oh, where do we start?
Yeah, you can start wherever you want.
Okay, so originally I was born and raised in Texas. I was born in San Antonio. It was a good experience. When I was younger, I ended up moving to East Texas. San Antonio was foundation. It was great. But I was raised with as best as I could do with a single parent. My mom, she was amazing. And on top of that, we didn't live always in the best areas. So I got to learn a lot about who I was, especially when I was younger, just seeing different things, which taking that helped me understand that a couple things in life, people have good ones, right? They have silver spoons. Some people don't. But at the end of the day, what you do as a human is up to you. I can go from a multi-million-dollar family to a very poor adult, or I can go from a poor family to a very rich adult. It's all on me because I actually have that guidance. So I think a long time ago, which helped set a lot of things up with my mindset at a young age, was being raised in the bad part of San Antonio. I saw a lot of my friends doing things that weren't cool. And it could perpetuate to, as you grow up, you could be an example or be the example, right? If you don't have a good upraising, you don't have a good work ethic, then it can turn around to like, well, he was raised this way, so of course he turned out that way, right? That's just be an example. Or you could be the example of understanding like, that's not right. It shouldn't be that way. One day when I have kids, man, we're going to capitalize on everything. And I'm going to show them how I wish I was raised, which is a privilege. So you could be an example and just fall in line, or you could actually create your own line and just go from there. It's
interesting how many guys I know or people I know, or even that they've actually said very similar things on the show, like how they got into law enforcement and how those bad experiences that they may have even been involved in some cases, like draws them to like, there's a better way to do this because they had a good experience and they knew what the outcome of the bad experience would be for them if they went down that path, and somehow that gravitated towards law enforcement. And they're generally go-getters.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they get it.
And I think ever since I've been little, you could ask my sister. She's my favorite sister. She's my only one, so that kind of helps her out a lot. So I always joke with her on that. But even saying that, ever since I was little, I wanted to be in the military and I wanted to be a cop. Those were the two things I absolutely knew. So my drive was pretty simple. I didn't have to battle what I want to do, which some people do, and that's totally fine because you don't figure out what you want. But I've been lucky as a human. When I was little, I said, this is what I want to do. I saw it in San Antonio. I saw some of the San Antonio PD guys work. And I'm like, those guys made the bad guys that I know who were cool guys, that's what we knew, they turned them into regular human beings like that as soon as they did their job. So to me, they were like superheroes, right? And then saying that, military, I had family military, I wanted to do more. And it helped me achieve where I'm at now because the military was a good foundation for I can guarantee a good job, I can get pay, I can get college money. But not just that, I wanted to give back. I've always wanted to do military. So that was the first. And then when I did that, so born in San Antonio, moved to East Texas. I grew up in a smaller town called Quitman. So it was a 3A turned into a 2A. So I got to play every sport. And what was cool about that was if you had a lick of talent, then you got to play a lot. Well, I was very competitive, right? I wasn't the most fortunate kid. And that wasn't a sob story, but what I could provide was academically to the best of my ability, but physically. So I didn't have that cool truck in high school, but I guarantee I could start before you on the football team, baseball team. I could run in front of you in track. So that was where the competitiveness for me started was how can I be the best person that I can by creating my own foundation? Because at that time, it was still kind of a single mom thing, which amazing, right? So it is on me to kind of just set that groundwork and being competitive in a good way. I learned a long time ago because you could win every game, but if you're not fun about it, nobody wants to play with you.
Yeah.
Right. So I always try to take what I could from people and always try to give back. So between, I lived in Quitman in East Texas and I lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I ended up going to the military. So I did Fort Knox. I was a 19 Delta, which was a Cav Scout, armored reconnaissance specialist for those military guys, which was really cool. Because whenever I went into recruit, I'm like, what's the hardest entry level that you can do? Because I was always testing myself because I always wanted to see not what they're doing, but what I could do. And if it happens to be in the same market, then let's buy stuff, let's shop together. And then from there, I'm in this store. What's the better store? What's the better industry? What's the better field? So after I did basic and AIT, I ended up going to Alaska, which was a great experience if you haven't been.
It's not Texas, right?
Yeah, it is.
I've never been there.
Texas.
I've been to Texas. I've never been to Alaska.
Yeah, so from Alaska, they started the 172nd Striker Brigade, which was pretty cool. I was a E1, nothing private, moved up the ranks. We deployed to Iraq. I got to go to Iraq twice, which was a interesting experience, some of the best and worst time ever of my life. And growing up playing sports, I understand some people aren't always able to do that, which is cool, but they find niches in their craft, whatever it is, and they're able to be part of a team or part of a group or neighborhood kids, which helps them be better people, better humans. Well, going into military from sports, it just translated, and I was very competitive there, and I had a good core guys that like, we're about to go to war. We're going to go to Iraq, and we're going to do our job. And no matter why everybody was there and what was going on, I was there for you. I was there for each other. And then we had a great time. It was rough. It was tough. And, a lot of things happened and we weren't in the nicest places at all. Granted, when I first went, it was late 2005. Some of the places we went to, coalition forces were never there. So we were the first military presence that they saw. So it was a lot of coming to Jesus moments for a lot of people. And all it did was make me understand a good perspective of what is bad, right? How we live, what is bad on danger. And oh my gosh, I actually almost died versus pity party me, right? So anytime anything ever happened when I was little all the way to Iraq, it was a lesson. I didn't dwell. I just said that could have happened, but it didn't. So let's move forward. And then I just learned from that. I was able to learn from that, from having a interesting childhood, and I just continued. So I ended up going into Iraq. We did our full year. They said, y'all are done. We got stop loss. So I was part of the group that came back. I was a sergeant at that time, I was a dismount team leader. So I came back with some of my guys and they said literally overnight, hey, y'all are going back within a week. So that was trippy.
Wow.
Right? So when you
Jeez.
tend to go to Iraq, there's a workup, right? You go to training, whether it's in California or Louisiana, and then you process into the Kuwait. You do a month-ish of build-up, acclimation to weather, conditioning of training, re-zero and everything, because everything's different. You got to redo your guns. And then you transition into Iraq. So that was the first part. Well, when I turned around and literally went back, half my guys, right, I was dismount team leader. The other side of the house was already in Baghdad doing patrols, doing mix max. Match patrols with different squads just to hold it down while we got there. So I remember I went out with a couple of guys. They're like, hey, we're leaving tomorrow. So what do y'all want to do? They're like, let's go to Chili's. The furthest north Chili's in Alaska. We were up there. It was great because they brag about it. It's furthest north. And, had dinner, had a drink. And I'm like, man, tomorrow to the next day, I'm going to be in Iraq. And I'm like, oh, they'll probably ease us into it. Now, literally a day and a half later, I was in Iraq doing combat patrols. And I'm like, this is trippy. And it
Just
was
like that, from Chili's to combat.
Yeah. So
Patrol.
It depends how you look at it. Perspective, pity me, or let's get it. Because my guys were already getting it. So catch me up and let's roll. We're here. Let's do our job because it matters. Because if we mess up, we can't take things back. All right.
So that sets up kind of the next thing. How long were you in for?
So I did active duty was just about 4-ish years. I did inactive reserves, and then I did the reserves while I became a cop, just to finish that out. So 7, 8 total with all that time combined.
So there's an immediate transition in law enforcement.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting because I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to change gears and I wanted to contribute because at the time I was looking at doing different things. And to me at that level, going into deployments as regular coalition and the guys listening to our prior military who've been, they understand, your hand's not held, but there's a lot of steps. Well, all the SF guys, all the group guys, they didn't have to hold hands and they took bigger steps. So it was easier for them to transition. So I was trying to look at going group. But at that point, I had a son. I wanted to have a kid before I went because when I was in basic, the troop that left before me, like less than a month in, one guy was already in Iraq from that troop before I and was already killed. So whenever that kid died, who literally left that area a month ago, they said, this could happen to y'all. So let's get focused. So to me, I've always wanted to be a father, right? But at the same time, I wanted something at least to carry my blood, carry me on in some way for my family, not to be morbid or anything, but to be realistic. Because the line of work we do, we're selfish and we're selfish at the same time. We want to be safe, but at the same time, I will put myself out there because that's what I'm supposed to do. But saying that, going into, I had my son, his first birthday I ever made was when he was 3. So I knew coming back from Iraq, I was coming up on my E6. I was looking at putting a pack together, go SF. And if I dropped it, I'm never going to see my son again. I will, but not the same way I wanted to. I just wanted to be more involved. So the other aspect of what do I always want to do was become a police officer. So I remember why I made that I need to be there for him because he needs me because I didn't have that growing up. And I turned out just fine. I say, my friends won't say that, right? But I turned out as good as I could and I want to be better. So let me give somebody something I didn't have, right? So we had my son. I turned around and in Iraq, when that switch was switched, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I started the process. And I remember I called the recruiter because of the night-day difference. So I remember I waited up and I called the recruiter and they got me to recruiting. And I said, I got some basic questions. I'm interested in applying. They're like, yeah, this is what you do. You want to apply? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to wait a little bit. He's like, well, you can apply now. I was like, well, I'm in Iraq. And he goes, you're where?
You're calling me from where?
He's like, I'm in Iraq right now. I'm in Mosul. He goes, all right, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the most part. And he was very supportive. He's like, I think that's awesome, but you're going to have to wait till you get back before we even start any of this. So keep it up. We're here. We'll be here. So as soon as you're able to, when you're in the U.S., he goes, come on down. So,
it's so funny that you're calling. I mean, how many other dudes are trying to do that? They're trying to set up their return home already. Like they just want to get home, but you're focused on, I want to get home, but I need to move. I need to be doing stuff.
Next step.
Yeah. So how was that transition?
So it was actually easy. I say that because...
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah.
Makes me think of Sal's response on his episode too.
Yeah, exactly. Like for guys that are just constantly getting after it, it's like, so we did that. We got through that and went on moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, because like I said,
it's
right?
Winning.
It was a winning, right? It was a good experience and I learned a lot. And to this day, I got a good group of guys that we still talk to. And my best friend, I'm going to brag about him some. He continued, he got out. He was a diver, right? And he did National Guard, but he was engineer diver. From there, he ended up going PJ, and he's about to retire. He's got
Nice.
4 or 5 more years.
Oh, cool.
But now he's going through their training of teaching their young PJs on what to do. So he actually moved back to Texas, which is great because me and him try to connect. Every year we used to link up and do guy stuff. It was a great excuse. So now he's like, I'm a couple hour drive, bro. Let's go, homie. So saying that, I still keep good contact, and the guys I know kept it going forward as best as they can. But the transition to becoming a cop was honestly easy because when I came on, cops were needed, right? The environmental officers were different. They were just like, yeah, let's go, right? So saying that standards, they didn't lower them. They just opened up the pool to bring more people in because it was just trying to like, here's a fire hose. Let's see who we can weed out and let's see who we can actually apply to this job.
All right. So you were eager to do it. And you said you'd always wanted to do it. Did you really know what the work was going to be?
I had a good idea because I'll be honest, it couldn't be worse than the military. It could not be worse than the military. And, saying that.
So there's probably a lot of people that agree with that, but I don't know. I don't have experience, so I don't know.
When your schedule, so say basic, when they say you're mine the whole day, right? You're like,
they really
I'm yours
the
whole day.
Yeah.
And then when you go through academy, some people have a hard time because they're not used to that structure, which is okay, but it's adjustable. So whenever they're like, you're mine all day, I'm like, actually till 5 because y'all aren't paying us overtime and we're about to get smoked for 20-ish minutes and I could handle this.
Anybody can do anything for 20 minutes.
So it's all about perspective, right? Yeah. I'm like, till 5, let's go. And never disrespectful, but understanding that it's how you look at it.
Yeah, mentally,
Everything's how you look at it.
That's funny.
So.
All right, cool. So you go through the academy, come out right into being a patrol cop?
Yeah, so I ended up doing academy. That was good. It was a long academy, but it was needed. That transition was pretty good. And just for those who are interested in being officers, especially transitioning to military, it's a good thing. The scenarios, the law enforcement physicality job is actually easy transition for us. The academics is learning a new way. Right, you have to learn how to study because you have judges, lawyers. So if you're listening, just take mine to like flashcards and have a good study partner. So to me, the academic part was learning a new way to like have a lawyer or a judge talk to me for 6 hours. And then I have to highlight stuff. And then I have to figure out what's important because what's going to be on this randomized test. Yeah. So academy, though, other than that, was pretty good. I got out, became a patrol officer. I wanted to end up doing the hood. I wanted to end up doing the part of town that wasn't always sought after by people who typically had a lot of money, which typically tends to be the lower poverty areas. Yep. So to me, I knew that's where it was going to be and I wanted to get right into it. I had a good partner and every day at work was an adventure.
So eventually you move into like the special operations side of law enforcement, but I just wonder kind of how that journey was, from in between, like what are the things you're learning? Did you have your eye on, I'll just let the cat out of the bag, on the SWAT team early on?
Yes.
I'm not surprised by this, but I just wanted to ask how this came up for you.
So, some of us in life, I think we have that itch that needs to be scratched, right? And if I can't scratch it because something happened, that's cool. How can I contribute to those who are getting that itch? And also, how can I scratch my own itch and help out? So to me, not being able to go to selection and understanding that world wasn't going to happen because I needed to be here for this person. Whenever I went to the police department, I was like, they said, what do you want to do? And I straight up told them, this is my goals. And in the interview process, it was very fun because you're interviewed and a lot of those questions, it's like a firing squad. They're just asking you questions, but it's a good thing because they're vetting how you handle stress and pressure. Mm-hmm. And I remember when it came down, they're like, you think it's that easy? I said, no, it's not, but I'm going to work hard at it. And they're like, well, officers don't always get to go home. And also they're always called out. And I said, I understand that, but I just came back from Iraq and it took 7 to 6 months to see my son. So if I had a 23-hour day and could go home and see my son for that 1 hour, we're good.
Yeah. So, still a win.
And I wasn't trying to be rude or sarcastic, but I was just being realistic. And one of the guys on my board were ex-military and I saw him nodding his head because he understood, right? And they understood my answer too. But that journey just perpetuated into how do I put myself in a position where when it comes to the opportunity, I'm ready.
Yep.
I'm always ready to go. So going into that, patrol was good. I ended up doing some task force stuff, which was real good. I ended up teaching on the side, which was really good. Also would do other stuff like ask baton. I used to teach that for the department and outside travel. So I got a lot of exposure to that. And then when the opportunity came up to apply for SWAT, I would say I had a good foundation within the department where a lot of people just saw me because I would teach internally and they knew I could talk to people and I could relate to a certain point. And then they would always see me at the range where it was a really good thing where they're like, hey, let's see how it turns out and let's see what works out. So I remember one time after my first year of probation, because the way the department works is you have 6 months and you have a year, you're off probation. I was able to get in rifle school, which was a great thing. So as soon as I got in rifle school, the SWAT guys taught it. And I'm like, oh yeah, let's see what these guys are cooking. Like I'm here smelling
this
it.
is my flavor.
Yeah, let's eat this up. So we got to go through rifle school. And I remember after the school, I had very valid questions, but a lot of the guys were like, hey, were you prior military? Because they could just, I guess you could tell, right? Military and or cops or guys who do the industry, like you carry yourself different in a certain way. So I remember one cue to me that helped me out was I always reached out to people who I thought would be honest, right? I don't need nice. I don't want you to tell me what I'm doing well.
Oh, so what you're saying is you wanted like objective feedback.
Yeah.
You didn't want your feelings
Yeah, don't worry about
being
them.
stroked.
Yeah. No, don't tell me what I'm doing good. Tell me what I'm doing bad and how I could be better. Because if you don't have to mention it, that means I was doing it right. So let's work on my deficiencies and give me that corrective criticism.
Yeah, let's get right straight to the point.
Yep. So it worked out. And I remember one of my guys, he ended up leaving the team. He does other stuff now. He's a great dude. The guys I work with know exactly who he is. His nickname's Apache, right? So saying all that, this dude would take it to you. What I remember though, because I remember who is this big guy? Afterwards, he goes, hey, are you going to apply to SWAT? And I said, that's the goal. I would really like to because you need to apply because we're going to have school coming up. And I said, hey, man, I would love to. That's the goal. But I'm honestly still wet behind the ears. He looked at me. He's like, wet behind the ears? I guess it's a military thing. I said, yeah, I'm still new, man. Like birth. I'm still new. I'm a rookie still. He goes, okay, as soon as you hit your time, you need to come over. You need to try to come over. So keep doing what you need to do and keep getting it. So I was like.
So the vote of confidence.
Yep. Which learning from other people, watching other people just helped me kind of try to drive and feed off everybody. So like if you were a guy that had questions, I'm going to take all I can from you and I'm going to give you what I can back. It might not be much, but it might be something. And that really just kind of was like, okay, Joe, what you're doing is on the right path. Keep finding those avenues to just keep bettering yourself. So saying that, just going into the history, I left Iraq 07, came on to the police department in 08, and then came to the SWAT team in 2017-ish is when I came over. So I've been lucky enough to be on a full-time SWAT team in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex since that time. And then from there, just the wealth of knowledge just coming over. Because it's always like you think you know, you don't. And it's like, here we go. Just feed it to me, fire hose. I can take what I can. Let's just try to figure it out.
So it's interesting to me. Let's see, would you say 8 to 17?
Yeah, so
08 to 17.
Yeah, I came back from Iraq in 07. 2008 is when I became an officer, and then 2016 is whenever I came over to SWAT.
And that's the earliest you could apply?
No, so the process at first when it happened was as needed to fill slots. So the gaps were kind of big.
Oh, okay.
Because as needed, and they would try to catch up, and they would try to fill the slots as.
Gotcha.
The process we have now is better because we have a running list, and you're able to just about every year. There's a SWAT school, and they're able to pull from that, and also gives guys opportunities sooner. So one thing on the team, we're seeing younger guys sooner versus it took me, what?
Yeah, 9 years.
Yeah, just 8-ish years to 9 to get over to the team. But what it helps though is maturity of age, right?
Sure.
When you have a young guy come over, he might be really good at this, but is he mature? So all the guys from the younger ones on the team to the old heads are looking at the full spectrum, not just like he's a great shooter, great runner. He thinks on his feet, but like, is this guy an adult?
He's squared away.
Yeah, is he squared away?
Yeah, you had mentioned something to me earlier that again, in that history, you talked about being an instructor, like an ASP instructor.
Yeah.
And I was kind of trying to make the connection points with being a coach in terms of how you teach, which you're very good at it. it seems very natural for you, but the reality of it is you've had a lot of practice with this over the years.
Yeah.
And so that became very obvious to me. This was my first, I met you whenever TTPOA was,
TTPOA,
almost a year ago,
May or something like that. Yeah. But, from the coaching perspective, I just like, where did that show up for you? Like what's going on in life outside of the ASP instructor thing, that gives you the coaching skill that you have?
So I was able at a young age as an officer, I had people approach me and say, hey, would you be interested in, say, teaching in-house, and we could help get you to where we need you, and then just be you.
Okay.
So I got lucky on that. And I think a lot of it is I was always eager. And when it came to the line, I was always trying to be first in line. And that would always, there's no such thing as a dumb question, but I found some of them, right? Because I would ask because I needed to, I needed to understand a little more, right? So I think that a lot of the guys in a way saw that I would put myself out there, because I think what you're saying is very beneficial and it could help out. So internally, I got to teach, and same thing from there. I got to work with ASP, got to train with a lot of different people. And then also back in the day, we ended up buying a CrossFit gym, which was a pretty good establishment that we were able to carry the legacy on, which was nice.
Cool. Nice. Okay. So there's some coaching there already, which drives directly into this. Okay. So let's talk about just, like briefly your experience in, on the SWAT team as it relates to the population that's being trained by IEP now. And, I guess I don't actually know how you guys met, like, and how this connection actually happened, and then how you wound up here, like to where we are now, because you're heavily involved with the instruction. I mean, there's where we are now in DC area. You guys are gonna be out in Washington for a TPL very, very soon in the state of Washington. So you've been at the front of this thing for quite some time. I just maybe quickly, what's the story on the intro there? Because I don't know.
That's good. It took me a second. I was thinking, because I first jumped to Fort Worth and I was like, that's not right. Yeah, it was the TTPOA competition.
I remember the day. So what's interesting is I want to hear what you say, and let's see if we match.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about it. I was trying to kind of process through. I want to say it was during the O course. It was right after the O course finished up, and we were all going to the ceremony or whatever at the end of TTPOA, and you and Fro were over there. Yeah. Because he was there that first year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And y'all were over there hanging out. We were all just kind of talking, and then we went over to the ceremony and stuff, and then we started talking there. But I want to say we started talking on
before.
Huh?
Yeah, it was slightly before that. Yeah.
Yeah. But we started talking more so at that time. Yeah. Initially about the clothing brand I was working with at that time. Yeah. Isn't that where we kind of started talking on?
Yeah.
And because the San Antonio guys were rocking them.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh yeah, Jake hooked us up. And so then we started talking and stuff like that. And we started talking, became buddies.
Yep.
And then we held a TPL in Fort Worth. Let's see, the competition is normally in October. And then TPL was...
I remember the weather was nice.
It was... Well, it was inside. It was indoors at Fort Worth. So yeah, I kind of want to say it was the summer after that. Is that right?
It's about,
somewhere in there. So anyway, we talked a bunch since then, and then you came out to TPL.
So for those people listening with the TPL acronym, it's the Tactical Performance Lab.
Yeah, so it's our human performance course that we kind of started. That really, I would say, is our foundational course.
Signature course.
Yeah, our signature course. And CrossFit background, but like
this
super
came in
fit
and
dude.
killed
Like,
it.
yeah, the guy's crushing everything. And so he was just like, man, I'm all about this. How do I come in here, get better, work? Y'all had a call out or something, so you weren't able to make the first day.
Yeah. I think I missed part of the first day, so I had to go half or something.
Oh, that's
I had
right.
A warrant
so
or
we had 2 TPLs back to back. Y'all had a call out the first day or a warrant, so you couldn't come the first day, so you came the second day, and then you came back the third day?
I think I missed part of the first day, and I came towards the second half because y'all were doing the physical fitness part, and I got to jump into
testing.
So I came just hot and heavy off the warrant. I'm like, let's go.
Yeah. That's good.
Which it actually, now that you're saying that now, it's kind of refreshing for him, reminding me. But yeah, he did. He came in and I remember at that time, I knew you did a lot of fitness stuff, but all guys, I'm kind of like, hey, let's ease into this. I could see Joe over here warming up, and like he was doing a dynamic warm up, but I'm still like, hey, ease into it, because we were doing the sprinting stuff.
Yeah, you guys, okay.
And I'm kind of like holding him back for a second, and I was kind of like, hey man, hang on just a second, because I hadn't seen him run or anything like that of like to the level that we do. And he's just like, do you remember this? He straight up, he goes, hey, do you mind if I go ahead? Do you mind if I hop in? And it was very respectful. Like I was trying to be careful because we in TPOs,
try not to hurt anybody.
we have had guys hurt, generally hamstrings or quads. Yeah. Something happened. So I was trying to be careful. And he very respectfully was like, hey man, do you mind if I jump in? Like I love this. And I was like, sure. And he got in there like boom, straight into it. It was actually, now that I'm recalling, it was pretty funny because I think some guys are very hesitant because it's so new.
Oh yeah.
And it's something they're not comfortable with.
With the sprinting piece?
Yeah, with the sprinting piece. Yeah. And also just stepping in the middle of a class. Again, it's kind of what we see at every class. Guys are kind of feeling each other out, trying to figure out. Yeah. Whereas like Joe, you're very comfortable in your own skin.
And I think so, because I've been fortunate enough when I came on the team to have guys that would give good feedback to like, hey, put yourself out there. If you mess up, let's figure out why and let's correct it. So it allows that space. And that was that space to put myself out there, let my guard down, because you're going to correct what you need to. Because I see things differently than you, but you're the guy running the class. So, hey, I'm going to do what I think you're asking, and you're going to critique me as we go. But that's what I absolutely need. So I think when people tend to hold back or just stay in reserve, they're not getting that full value out of it because they're kind of like, no, dude, show me what you got. And then we could wind it back a little bit and start addressing these things.
You know, that's a good point, just in terms of how, like I've seen, I don't know, I've been involved in so much instruction across the board, not just like firearms instruction, but fitness instruction, all kinds of things, like in where people start and that attitude about like easing people into something versus like, no, we got to do the thing. And then we can dial it back, which is a good amount of the approach that, you know, has been taken the last few days just here with regard to getting behind the gun and like, well, let's go out and see what people are capable of or not, right? Obviously, risk, reward, all that stuff gets weighed into it, but it's very safe and whatever. But on the exercise piece, it's the same. It's like, well, we have to do an assessment, right? And if you're working with people that are supposed to be physically fit, right, and that, you know, on-demand performance is part of the job, like you should be able to get into it. But I also understand the caution, because just because they're quote unquote fit doesn't mean they're fit to do this. So I wonder what like your impression was like going through that TPL as maybe as broken as it kind of was. Like how'd that go?
So what was interesting is the fact that if he said no, I'd be like, respect, I'll ease in as you see fit. But he's like, I hear you. I trust what you're saying because you should know your body. So do what you think. Because the way I look at it, if these guys are doing it, I should be doing it. And if I'm not spun up, I'll get spun up. On top of that is in the moment that you have to do your job, in that important moment, that's as good as you'll ever be. There's no time to turn around and come back and be like, man, I'm going to start doing more jiu-jitsu ground and pound. I'm going to start shooting more. So if somebody says, okay, cool, do it. A lot of the confidence is, okay, I've done that enough where we're about to find out. Like when we're in front of classes, like, I segue on this, but when Jake's up there shooting, a lot of validation for the students because they're shooters, right? And they are good shooters. They're like, let's see what this guy's got. And then when he gets up there and he runs it, they're like, okay, cool. Okay. Yep. So
we can move on to the next thing now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And like I tell people all the time, when you shoot around your guys, you kind of get used to each other. But when you shoot around other people you don't know, that endorphin spikes a little bit. That energy is just up there. So now if you do something, it's typically something you induce and or you're not sticking to what you know is your habit. So saying that, whenever I'm in front of students, I'm like, no, I like this because I don't really know y'all. We're learning each other, but this is good pressure. So let's see what I do. And they respect that, which is true. So when I see an instructor and they're the same way, I'm like, I respect that because you're putting yourself out there like I am. So coming into it, I knew that's what he did. So I said, let me put myself out there. And I was able to catch pace and catch up to the guys, which was really cool. Everybody was really, welcoming. And then from there, we just run and gun.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. We're interesting. So again, like I understand through a lot of, so sorry guys, for those people listening, we got carts and people running through the rooms and stuff, but that we're in. But a lot of the IEP instructors have come into IEP through experiencing what IEP has to offer.
Yep.
Right? Like you. Yeah. That story is familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we have that requirement, honestly. Like if you want to teach, because I believe what we're teaching is not normal. And so if you've never taken the class before, it's very hard for me. We've had people in law enforcement at federal and other larger agencies and local teams, full-time teams that are like, hey, I'm pretty sure I can do that. Can I be an instructor? And I'm like, no. Like, if you've never come and seen our stuff, just what you see on Instagram, which I do think we put out a lot of good free stuff, if you will. But I think that's a piece of it. Like, are you willing to come and understand what we're doing?
Oh, yeah.
Put the time in to grow, learn, and understand it. Because I think that was one of the things early on that
you have to make the commitment.
You have to make the commitment, but it's just different.
Yeah.
I think what you see, a lot of people see on social media think is like, oh, we're just running around with guns. Like, it's way more technical than that. And up to this point, you know, even in the shooting community, larger shooting community, I've seen other instructors that I think that there are some people out teaching movement, but definitely not to the level we are. The only people that even are close is maybe a JJ Rakaza, but he's in the competition space. With JJ and I have talked, and we're not teaching the same thing.
Yeah.
Because they are different styles of movements. Application, thank you.
Yep.
And so, yes, they almost come through the class, and I think that's where we found. However, like guys like Joe, it's funny as I was listening to you, because I think that some people don't, people don't know you. So it's one of those things you listen to and you're like, okay, yeah, like I get it. You are very similar to Sal. I don't know. I'm curious that you're on this,
you're right. Yeah.
Like their personalities are so similar. Of like, as you talk about the challenge and like just stepping in there and like the work you've done, like in that moment,
they're excited about it.
They are. It's just like they're excited for. I almost to where I'm like, but as I was listening to you, I was processing. I was thinking. I was almost like, there's times where I almost feel like I need to rein back a little bit.
That's the
like,
best
hey, bro, I know
that,
you know, I know you didn't perform to your level, but you recognize your level's way different. And I think the other thing for Joe, we talked about this after the class. I think I was a little hesitant with Joe coming in because he is from a full-time team that does a lot, and it was kind of like. Because I've worked with all levels of special operations units, and some are good, some are not good.
Sure.
Sometimes some of the ones that have way more experience and or bigger, sometimes the ego matches it. Yeah. I'm not saying all. I have a lot of friends at a lot of different agencies. But I was a little hesitant with Joe at first of like trying to feel him out of like, okay, who is this guy? He's got this like go-get-it mentality. He's very, your attitude as I was listening to you about the military and stuff is, you are so positive and just like in the moment of like, hey, this is what we got. Like, you're always looking ahead of how to be efficient or how to help or build a relationship. And it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I got to get a read on this guy.
Yeah, because
you know what I mean?
Like, pop up?
Exactly. Like when is it going to happen? It is exactly. And it's not even just from the team you come from. It's just the industry, frankly.
Yeah.
And so like when you came in, I remember that now that I'm sitting here talking on it, I remember vividly of you stepping in, you immediately just on your own started warming up and I was like, okay, we're on a good start. And then we're sitting there and I'm like, hey, I'm kind of like, hang on a second, just watch. And then we'll get you to hop in. And you're like, hey man, do you mind if I hop in? And I remember thinking like, that's not normal. Number one, most people are going to be like, yeah, no, I'll wait till there's a break or something. Like Scott, so you understand, we were in like rep 3 of 5. And he's just like, do you mind if I was like, go for it, homie. You know what I mean?
And on my end, I'm like, man, this is so cool. Let's go. I want to get it.
Like literally, that's what his personality was like. And like, there was no, yeah, man, you just really did good. Like in that moment, took that material. And then I think that was the other big thing. And all of our guys that are teaching for us, but then they go and like grow and they adapt and they look of like, how do I make that my own and have that flavor of being able to, as you're presenting that material. But it's just like the shooting industry. I think we've all looked at the process we were talking on. And Sal and I talked on this on the podcast he was on. All of us as shooters, when IEP started, were at a point. All of us have grown as shooters. And I think that piece, we've looked at the process. But the movement stuff that is all new to all of us, we've also built a very specific process that I don't believe anybody else is doing right now. It's a little easier for me because I built it. Like I built a lot of the stuff. Yeah. But for y'all, and I remember with Preston and Sal specifically, early on, they were like, hey, dude, I need more reps of this. I'm not comfortable. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're doing fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But all of y'all have gone through that.
Yeah.
But you've taken the time to understand it. I think that's my big thing that I look and I appreciate at such a high level and I respect y'all at such a high level and appreciate greatly. All of y'all are taking it, making it your own. Because this is not, I think that's my struggle sometimes. This is not a me thing. I may have been like the initial, but everybody else has grabbed a hold of this thing, and that's why we are where we are.
Agreed.
And I think that's my issue with you guys leading in the front, and I think that's why we get so many opportunities in the law enforcement space is because we have people that they're like, hey, that's one of my own out doing this and teaching, and I think they're very willing to listen because of it.
You know, coming into your space, I was like, all right, this guy actually has something that's very beneficial because we got to go to a lot of different schools and I put myself through schools, but to actually talk to somebody who actually cared, not just like, hey, this is your problem, but we could help you fix your problem, right? Just kind of going back into that was actually really nice. But being able to step into it on the backside is you're always self-developing. And not just that, this applies to my job every day that will impact my family if I do something wrong.
Sure.
Right. And I've been blessed. I have 5 beautiful kids. I have 1 daughter, right? She's amazing. So saying that, I don't just time on range, time with the guys, and I work with a great team from the old heads to younger guys, you know, a lot of good dudes that are always sharing knowledge and then just trying to figure out what's going on and how we could be better. But the time I put in myself, like the officers we train, it's not just for them, it's for their family, right? They're trying to give back to them and make sure they give back to them. So whenever we're like Sal and Preston, they're just kind of like pushing themselves and they're hard on themselves. People don't see what they're doing on the back burner. Like they didn't see what you did on the back burner to get where you're at. Sure. So on my end, when I'm putting in extra work because I'm being crucial is because whenever we go deliver your product to people, and I've told you this before, it's easy to do something you believe in, right? It's not work. It's not worthless or the time I spent is very much spent right while I do it. So saying that when I get in front of a class or you get in front of a class, you want to produce because they deserve that. So it's not just being introduced and vetted and not just that like, okay, let's see his process. It's the maintenance of it, which is great because when you go to a class, they get the best of Jake, 100%. And they're 100%. Like, all right, this guy, not on the line, but he's also talking to these guys on the side because he honestly cares where he's from. You know what I'm saying? So that's a good human trait that some instructors don't have, and you get that disconnect. But the fact that we're able to be in a space where we could just continuously build on ourselves. So when we go in front of other people, we could help deliver something good to them is actually what keeps the class really engaged.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting just kind of listening to you guys go back and forth about that and sort of the evolution of the process and thinking about, you know, there's the shooting piece, there's the movement piece, and then there's bringing that all together. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of pieces that are in between there. But, you know, I wonder as guys go, you know, they get introduced to it like you did and they see it and they see, man, there's some value in this. And I don't exactly know everything there is to know about this right now. Like, and so I'm not really comfortable teaching it. Yeah. But then they try to understand it. And so the question I would have actually now in that is like, where was it or at what point did you start to really understand it? Did it, and I guess what I'm asking you is like, and has it showed up for you on the job, right?
Yeah.
In a way that you were like, I thought this might be the case, and that just proved to me or validated that what I thought was right, or I didn't even see that coming, and this validates the things that we've been doing. It kind of surprised me. I mean, what can you tell me about that? Because I'm curious, because you do a really good job with like giving people context to things. Like you don't have to tell them the very specific thing or create some scenario for them, but you do a really good job at I'll just say it this way. You can ninja the fuck out of these guys' brains by just putting this little seed in there, and then you go like that, and you put it, and you can see the light bulbs start to go on, and they start to make these connections, like the brain activity just switched on more. Yeah, I've been watching you do that for 3 days, so I'm wondering where that maybe switch went on for you, and how did you know?
So, you know, I would like to say everything we know, we were born that way, but we are not. Somebody, you know, I say this jokingly. Somebody taught you how to wipe your ass, right?
Yep.
And then as you progress, you learn how to do it better.
God bless that woman. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, thanks to all the moms, right, and dads for those who just had that.
No,
right?
wasn't him.
And both.
It was definitely Mom.
So saying that, I learned from, I was able to get blessed with people who actually cared. And then guys I was working with, they would help give me nuggets. And I would take from that. I'm like, okay, that applied to me. How can I help apply that to somebody else? So internally into class, where I feel that it helps is the application, right? Where this can actually apply. Because some of the stuff people do in general, they're like, okay, depends if they're guarded. They're like, well, how can this relate? Mm-hmm. Well, I got several scenarios right here on how it could relate. So, for example, we were talking about the cheek or the buttstock, right? Well, I have my kit. It's in the way. Well, check this out. Different types of kits. You can have something from there that induces a malfunction or induces just not proper seating because of the way your kit is set up. So maybe you should look at a different kit, right? If you have something hard here, it takes away from actually pulling it into your shoulder. Or, well, how is this going to apply from me doing this feed drill, right, to shooting? Well, what if this was your first shot on the target, but he had body armor, he kept moving, then he came and you got another, as you're chasing him into building, he presented himself against you, you had another good shot, but you caught the body armor, and then now you had to run up a flight of stairs, your heart rate's up, and now you got to take these 2 shots, and you learn because you were assessing everything you did, and then now you're able to put good rounds on target and stop the threat.
That sounds like a scenario.
Yeah.
You ever been there?
So it's been interesting. Yeah. So
that's what I was saying.
So this is what I was asking.
I was like, that sounds like a scenario, but in reality, it's an actual incident. For you.
And I think too, to add to this for a little more context, I think that's why it's so important whenever we all go teach together. It's because that's not my world, because exactly, I can't provide that context because I've not done that. However, these guys have been really good about, hey, these are things that we have done or our experience, and here's how it applies. Joe, I would say, has a lot of experience from multiple points throughout his life in the military and law enforcement. And so I think it's one of those things that, as you're saying, he's really good about, as you're saying, ninja, but honestly, just articulating that and towards application. I think I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like it's easier because you've had a lot of experiences that you can very quickly pull back to and be like, hey, this is an experience I had. Here's where it applies. Yeah. Although one thing I do really appreciate, I want to call out, in class, you don't do that. You don't say, hey, this is what I did. Here's where it applies.
Yeah. I never heard that.
And I respect that greatly because I think sometimes then people are like, okay, now we're telling stories, right? Yeah. I think you do a good job of saying, hey, here's a place, maybe just as a slight example. And anyway, not to cut you off, but that was something I think is a really important piece of that.
Yeah, I think what you do well in that class, it's not about me, it's about them, right? And at the same time, how can I just help apply what I think is important to them because they might think it's important too. And just kind of backwards talking, like that scenario is true to a point because say that person that took those first shots, they weren't me, but maybe the people going up the stairs or the people moving through a house, you know, it just applies to anybody and it's applicable. And I've been fortunate enough to work with a core group of guys that when the call came, they answered, they picked up, and there was no hesitation. And that's just the world we live in. And that's why I think it's very important, like that day with the reps, can I jump in? Because when that call's there, you got to jump in. Let's go. Let's work. And you could look, guys who are talking, whether you're military, civilian, or law enforcement, you know the core group of guys, whether you're, like I said, even corporate, you know the guys that will go and get the job done. Same thing with law enforcement, firefighters, everything in general, military. You got your core group. And because of them is who I am. And then because of me is who they are. So it's just like, you know, still sharp and still. So experiences and lessons are 2 different things, right? Experiences, I think, is this helped me understand how I could do this better and train better. Lessons are like, I remember one of the first times I got shot at in Iraq, which was very funny. So we were in a striker unit. We were on the outside of town and we were just circling the entire town just to see what was on the outskirts because we were just trying to get the lay of the land. And there was somebody in town. The town was from the base about a mile-ish. So we were just under a mile, but he was in there ripping with a little PKM, just full auto, just ripping. But at that distance, we couldn't hear it. So when we were driving, just a little side story, this is a lesson, right, versus experience. But I remember it sounded like we had a flat tire, and it was striker had 4 tires. It was a run flat system. I'm like, that's not weird. I'm here at team leader. I'm like, They're like, hey, can you check, Sarge? Can you check on the other side of the truck? And I'm like, yeah, let me look. I'm like, tires are good. Well, back where I was at on the northeast area of north of Missoula, I was at Rihanna, Raleigh, everything. They had a thing called moon dust, which like the consistency for those guys who've been, because we were attached to like second mar div. Those guys who've been in that area, it's like flour. The consistency.
Silty. It's silt.
It's
right?
everywhere.
That's from the river, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's anywhere from inches to feet, right? And you can't tell the difference. But I remember leaning over the striker, grabbing onto our bird cage. I'm like, nah, tires are good, bro. Nothing's wrong. And then somebody said, hey, we're getting shot at, get in. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I look up and it was like splash, splash, splash. You ever seen rain come across water or rain hit the sand? How it kind of just deckers? Yeah, it's just pop, pop, pop. And I'm like, man, it's not raining. Like, we're getting shot. I'm like, yeah, but it was raining bullets. But you see the spread was like every
should be laughing. That's
15.
not funny
No,
at all,
but it
actually.
is because that was a lesson learned, but we didn't know until. But I'm sitting out there like stretched over, hanging out of 45 off the vehicle, trying to look. And they're like, hey, we're getting shot at. I'm like, no, we're not. I'm like, and I look up, I'm like, oh, it's raining. Splash, 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 splash. And I was like, oh, we're getting shot at. So we can't engage because we can't positively ID, but we could just drive away. And thanks for playing, guys. So that was a good lesson. So I think everybody can relate to lessons learned, right? You can make it a fun way and also experience. And both are the same, one or the other. But I've been very fortunate on having a lot of operational experience, whether it's dynamic warrants to dignitary to BPs to HRs, whatever the world is. I've been lucky enough to be under the wing of some really sharp dudes who said, hey, yeah, this is real, let's go. And I'm like, you're there, I'm there, right? So let's do it. To the point where when we get students who are a little guarded, we're like, how does this apply? How does this 2-shot drill, how does this apply at 50 yards, for example? I'm like, well, you might have to take that full percentage shot on a target with a good backdrop. And if you decided to do reactive over predictive, you need to understand why. And you need to understand in that shot how you can make a micro adjustment because you're realizing he's not going down, body armor, and you just shift your shot, either lower girdle into the legs or up into the higher thoracic, right, in the face, neck area. So being able to do that on the range can definitely articulate. So when people are like, well, how does this move over? I'm like, it moves over like this. And when it's called, your time is there. Can you punch that ticket in the right way? Or are you going to miss? So it's nice to be able just to help articulate ways where people are kind of like, well, I don't buy in yet because I don't see it. And when I'm able just to help, they're like, oh, okay. And then it's on them to build their story and their scenarios because they always should have them in their head for what to do. So when you said be able to plant that seed, you know, somebody did that to me a long time ago and they just kept doing it. So it's like, how can I pay it forward?
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. I think it's a huge piece. Even as I'm sitting there listening to you and I was thinking about it, of kind of my approach, I get caught up sometimes in the process or the training side of it because that's what we're doing in that moment. That's how we're impacting them. And I think that is that's the importance of, I would never say that. I've never been in those shoes. And so I think that's, again, a strength of what we're doing because I think that there's, I don't want to be negative, but I think there's a lot of people out in the community, in the tactical community, and maybe I shouldn't say a lot, there's a handful out in the tactical community that have never done anything, which, however, comma, big however, comma, but whatever I want to say. I think there's times and places it's appropriate or it's okay if you have that expertise and you're being very specific in what you're teaching. If you're teaching something you have no experience in whatsoever, especially in the tactical community when it comes to firearms and the application of them. For example, I will never teach CQB.
Yeah.
I can have a very educated conversation because I've watched a ton of CQB, but I don't do CQB for a living. I'm never, ever, ever going to go teach CQB.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that there's people out in the space that do that. And it's like, I personally don't agree with it. And maybe I should say, I will never go take one of those courses. I'm not trying to deter someone else. Maybe that person's amazing at CQB. He or she is a CQB god or goddess. I don't know. But I guess all that to say, I think whenever we're teaching in class, my personal is I get in this like, almost like rut where I'm like, hey, this is your journey. You need to be continuing on. And I think you and the other guys are really good about like, yeah, he's not wrong, but there's a very direct application. And I do think sometimes there's it's almost like a slap, not a slap in the face, like a negative, but like a wake up call that people are like, oh shoot, yeah, I see. They're right. Yep,
Yeah.
I need to be over here with this guy in this trench, and we need to be going in the right direction.
So in going on to that, when it comes to the tactical community, people have different workflow, whether you're a part-time team or full-time team. Like the part-time guys, I have a lot of respect because they have a lot of hats they're wearing when it comes to patrol, detectives, or different shifts. And then they get called to come in. And just talking to a lot of those guys, because we come across them, I'll come across them. I'm always humbled by it. I'm like, dude, you're doing this job. And then you might do it a different application when it comes to actually doing energy onto a house. And you're still here and your hours are cut down on how much you get to train. So you're passionate about it. And I think that's amazing. So like those guys come to the school. So it's like, man, how can we give you as much as we can?
Right. Yeah.
You know, and because of that, those guys who are a part-time team or could be a school cop or who could be a small town sheriff, they're the guys that when it's their time, that person, that 1%er, he doesn't care where he's at. He just wants to do as much chaos and hurt. So if they don't get a lot of work in and they're feeling like they're lacking, and I'm talking to them directly, doesn't mean that's going to be forever. And it could be, but that's totally fine as long as you're continuously driving, because when that call comes, I guarantee you're going to do your job because that's what you've been preparing for your entire life. Yeah. So, you know, some of the biggest incidents have happened in small areas. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So when it comes to those guys, when they're just trying to drive forward, I see it. I'm like, all right, let's go. Because like I said, man, when it's your time, it's your time. So do your job.
I think the other big thing, you know, we're talking about part-time teams, but I also think full-time teams, right? Some
complacency.
Complacency, that's not what I was going to say, but I was thinking about I'm choosing my words wisely here of just, you know, some of the teams that we've worked with numerous full-time teams as well, obviously. And I think sometimes op tempo is so high that you don't get training opportunities. So I think we've done a good job of coming in and I think we really try to drive that efficiency. Yeah. Right? Because I think it turns into a thing of like, we're doing tons of ops. We got lots of experience. That's great. Yeah. But if you're not getting the time to train it or make sure those skills are honed in and sharpened. Refined. Great word. That's what I was looking for. They're not refined. Okay, well, now you're kind of behind the 8 ball too. And so it's everybody has their own issues. Like I dig that. And I think that's one thing I appreciate. And I think every class we teach, we say, hey, thank you. Y'all are here. We know y'all are putting in that time. Now, sometimes it's a situation where it's like agency A, operator A, go. Yeah. Right? Like sometimes they're showing up, they don't know what the class is. I would say that's more rare, but still it does happen. But that said, for the most part, though, I feel like they go, oh, this is great. We've had fewer situations that I feel like people have been like, well, this is a waste of my time. Yeah. And I appreciate the willingness. And I think there's a flip side of that on our side of like, we genuinely care. Yes. And so I think that relationship piece is important. I agree. And so it's just been a fun journey. Be able to work with full-time, part-time, federal, local. We don't care. Yeah, if you're willing to put in the time, we will put in the time. You know, I was trying to guess what you were going to say on how you were kind of going into it. And the complacency wasn't for like the full-time teams. It's the fact that they get so busy, it gets on the back burner. So when it comes to the higher guys, like when it comes to like chain of command, they tend to forget. These guys are doing good work, but to continue this good work, we need to maintain it like a car. You can't have a race car if you don't tune it up and take care of it. So, you know, complacency, sometimes the officers see it, they get frustrated, which I understand. Whether you're in the military, you get frustrated with your job in corporate, or a firefighter or a cop, you get frustrated with things. But if you just keep putting in your work, when everybody gets on the same page, you're already there and you're ready. So yeah. No, complacency, and actually even using that word very specifically, it happens to everybody. Exactly. Like literally any team. There's part-time teams like Preston, who is like, I have the utmost respect for that guy on a part-time team, and he could fit in on literally any team I have ever worked with. Agreed. Like no doubt. Agreed. Right. Everybody would be like, damn, you're on the A team for sure on any team we ever worked with. However, full-time, part-time, like I just don't think it matters. I think complacency, which I know you agree with this, of it doesn't matter who you're with. Complacency is always going to be there. I think we're at a point now where that those people are always going to be there. Yeah. All right, we know that. The logistics and the way that things are going in law enforcement right now, operation tempo, you're part-time, you've got multiple, literally many hats you're having to wear. full-time, your op tempo's high, or some get more training than others. It's just, there's not a one-size-fits-all.
Nope.
And so we are constantly also evolving. And I even, we were talking about that class that you attended. I was even thinking like to where we are now. Like, I'm actually curious, maybe this is a question for you, but because I kind of have my thoughts. I'm trying to think how the class has evolved from that. Let's just say it was July last year, and we're July now. So in 1 year, can you articulate, or do you think you could think about, like, because I kind of have my thoughts, but I'm curious to hear yours. How has it changed?
So I think everything's evolving. Like back in the day, cigarettes were good to smoke because it made you a better runner, right? Lead paint, I've said this before, lead paint was good, right?
It's fine. Everything's fine.
Everything as you go with time gets better because things are getting out there for people that they can grasp, right? The internet, podcasts, they're able to do their own research when they don't understand, or somebody can give them, hey man, check this plug out. This is awesome podcast. Or, hey, this is a good website. Or this is a good gram. So they're able to start doing their own research. So what I've seen personally is what's expected from the student has grown some. So because people are now the ones coming to class, they've always been hungry, but they're the ones who are seeing this, right? I know of y'all, and they're working on this on their own time. And they're like, I've been missing the piece of you though, to actually help me out. Because I've had a couple people say that.
That's interesting.
So because of that, you've naturally, from my views, have expected a little more because the caliber always grows. Like in the fitness industry, right? What was a PR bench then is not a PR bench now, right? So it's just the way to kind of how I see the growth. I don't know if that
that's interesting. That is
really solid point.
That's a really good one because that's not how I would have articulated it. But now that I'm hearing you say that, I'm kind of like, I think it's a two-sided thing though too. I also think our knowledge has grown, and like the ability to be able to articulate things at a higher level. And I feel like we've grown in our expertise. And frankly, for myself, at least I'll speak, I think for Preston and Sal too. My confidence as an instructor has grown. My confidence in how to articulate shooting has grown. I've always had the confidence in the movement because I was really the only one doing it.
Yeah, man, you're quick. If he ever takes something from you and runs, just wait till he gets tired.
I was going to say that might be quicker, but no. I think that our knowledge has grown, so it's interesting you articulate that. I don't know if I expect, but even as you said that, then I was kind of like, okay, I think we've created a higher level class, and to the point where we've had to separate them with the TPL. We've got the shooting classes, and so if you want more specifics, you want a higher expertise class, we're giving you those options. Whereas I think back then, it was a little bit, I don't want to say lower because it wasn't a bad thing, but we were kind of jamming it all in one.
Yeah.
And I think now we're giving you, whatever class you come to, you are getting tip top, like highest level expertise we have.
I definitely agree with that. And the cool factor is whenever you're getting that class or that thing, like you just reiterate, everything that is getting pushed to that point is going to be the best explanation on top of that, because we're not just giving you the cream of the cream, but I say this but when you're able to say, this is our threshold, we're pushing, wheels are about to fall off, you watch the students like, but after the class, they're like, oh yeah, wheels fell off, and I understood why. Because with volume of people you teach and coach, like, right, I used to be a CrossFit coach, we had the gym and everything, but you learn better ways to address people in shorter amount of time. So you're more direct and you're hitting those buttons or planting the right seeds. So when it comes down to it, you're not wasting time with a lot of fluff, but you're giving your flair, right? But at the same time, you're expecting more, but the way it's delivered is a lot.
Because of what you said, and that is the consumer is starting to become more aware of what's out there, and they're expecting a little bit more, and kind of drive that with a couple of things. One, I hear, and this was like a hot topic for a while. I want to say it was about a year ago, and the word was relevance. Yeah. Like how relevant are you?
Yeah, that bounced around work too.
Right. Yeah. So how relevant is this, or how relevant are you in the things that you're saying? And so I think this pops up for me here because I was just kind of watching that volley go back and forth. It was really interesting. But the relevance thing. So I think part of the growth, and I love that you just kind of, it was almost like a I don't know if I want to say it was like an admission. It was just like, we are way better than we were a year ago.
Yeah.
As we said, right?
But here's the thing. If you're not, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? So that is the
See, but you say that, and I think in the industry, and there's a lot of names that jump to the forefront of my mind that I'm like, I don't know if I can say the same about others that I've seen. And I'm not trying to sling mud here, but I'm just saying, and again, also, I just want to be super clear. This is not a Jake thing. There's been so many people that have come in. It's not just me. It is 100. I cannot express this enough. How many people have come in that is just on a rocket ship pushing this thing.
Yeah.
This guy's competitive nature.
This is my point.
Sal's like, exactly. Yeah.
Because everybody is pushing one another and they're going back in real life, whatever the fuck that means, right?
Yeah,
on their teams, in their jobs, whatever, in other classes with other agencies, working with other professionals, whether that's other instructors or whatever, and they are pushing one another. They're constantly pushing in a way that keeps it relevant and it keeps it constantly evolving and it keeps people challenged. And I think that's a big part of it is it's not delivering one thing and then saying that's the thing. It's delivering the thing and having more things come up along the way that recognize how much better it can still get. And I think, so going relevance, it was that word that kind of came up for me. And I think, going back to like, Joe's pretty relevant, right? In the space, right? And, he can do the things, but he's been there and he's watched it evolve. So he can also talk about what it looked like before. Yeah. So going back to the rocket ship, right? And people coming in, I think that's probably what really is pushing it. And I don't know, there's a lot more discovery that kind of needs to happen. That's one of the big things of me being here this week is just kind of see where that's come. Because I was there for that class basically a year ago, right? I was there for TPL a year ago and I saw some of it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I forgot San Francisco.
Right, yeah. And then compared to now, right? And I was actually there at TTPOA when we were delivering some other things. Even compared to now, like, and they weren't exactly the same place, but the instruction.
See, but even that's really, it's even, man, now that you're even saying that, man, it's wild to think this is a little journey here. That was the FBI guys out in San Francisco. Yeah. And then we came back to TTPOA.
There's a bunch of SWAT cops from Texas.
And that, dude, It has, and I think too, the competitive nature of the guys, the team that we've built. I also think I said this on one of the podcasts we did about kind of our growth of the company. And I felt like there were times whenever we started the company that I was kind of like, man, I don't feel like there's a good roadmap here that I can follow. I felt like we were just kind of like, I remember in the military, like rucking and doing land nav out at Fort Bragg.
Yeah, you have waypoints.
And you go through a draw. And if you've ever been through a draw at Fort Bragg, it's like daytime and you get deep down in the draw and it's pitch black. Like it literally, you're just like fighting through it. And I felt like that's kind of, when we started IEP, it was very lost of like, I'm not sure exactly where this is going, but we're still moving forward. To whereas I think it's been a big thing. I think that's been actually an asset now. Because we weren't pigeonholed to only this one thing, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like this new journey, it's allowed us all these opportunities for these guys to come in. And it's
who are pushing it.
Yes, and who are pushing it, one. But two, the other big thing I want to make sure that if you're listening, we're also not just throwing anything at the wall, and if it sticks, we're running with it.
I hear that's a good disclaimer
because
people are definitely going to look at it and think that that's what's happening, and you just
I'm going to head that one off. Anybody that we bring in is an expert at their craft, and we have had people reach out for specialty classes, which I'm not going to talk about at the air, and it's one of those things for me that I'm like, if you really want to know that bad, email us and I'll tell you who it is and you can talk to that department. Right. But what I tell that department is I say, I will not teach a single thing unless I believe we can teach it either at the highest level or your best option. Right. And I believe we stuck to that, right? We bring in experts that are capable to do that. And again, we're not just trying to see how many things. The do less and obsess, we did that. We focused, we got TPL where it needed to be. Okay, hey, somebody challenges encourage us to go dive into the shooting piece. Okay, well, I think we've done that. I think we've done it well on a pistol. Now we've done it on a rifle. So we've had these different opportunities that these guys have brought into it. And I think that's the piece of it.
And they brought it in through being actively involved in the thing. And that's from law enforcement to special levels of law enforcement. They're all part of special levels of law enforcement, whether it's part-time or full-time.
Yeah.
But then also they compete. And so like
there are a lot of pieces.
that whole talk around like being relevant, competing to stay relevant, to keep pushing and testing and understanding what your limits are or what they aren't, and validating things or whatever else. Everybody's doing that. Like they're all doing that at some level, at some space, right? And I think that in that way it is unique, and in that way you can't say, well, no, this is the direction we're going, and this is what the end is going to look like. Because if everybody's doing that by virtue of what, quote unquote, the industry is saying, then there is no end to this. There is no end to the growth. There is no end to the discovery, and so there is no end to the evolution of what stuff ends up coming. So I think through instruction, that like an instructors out there, I think what you were saying is, and I'll say it, like there's a lot of people that have been doing it a long time that they know they've stopped evolving.
So
and they're having a tough time with that right now, trying to figure out how to do that better. Or restart that process somehow.
So, and I think that goes into all the markets, right? Whether it's corporate world, law enforcement, firefighters,
100%.
military.
Agreed.
And the thing that I see in our line of work is the fact that you got guys, no matter size of the team, they'll have guys who are trying to stay relevant, but who aren't willing to put themselves out there to be exposed that they're not, right? And I say that knowing people listening right now will absolutely understand. They can look at guys on their team and be like, that guy right there doesn't want to put himself on the spotlight, but he's going to talk about all these things he knows, and he's pigeonholing us. He's putting us into a valley where we can't get out, and we'll be able to once he leaves or once that person's gone. And I think when it comes to this, those people coming to this class typically aren't those. So if you have that in your workspace, no matter what you do, right? But if you have that in your workspace and you were to come to a class, that's the stuff that you're going to turn around and take back whenever that wall gets removed. And I'm not trying to be negative, but a lot of people don't like to be exposed or go to separate school, because when I'm the guy and I know everything and I drive training and I'm the one that answers and tells, now you see me make mistakes. Now I think, hey, I'm not as good. No, it just shows me you're human and you're willing to correct it, which that tends to be a problem. We typically don't get those people into class, but the people who are under them, they see those guys who are still trying to stay relevant.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'll walk away from this thinking more deeply about that, just kind of in what the exchange I watched you guys have, and then how that relates back to like the other members of the team and kind of what they're doing and how they can be helped and supported, and how they can continue to support the team just in pushing things forward. Because it's interesting, like it's a lot of times you see instruction or companies or whatever else, training companies. This goes across many different genres or market segments. Going back to what you were saying, not just firearms instruction, but it ends up being about like a person and their ideas, and having them really have to drive the bus all the time. Look, you got to have leadership in place, right?
Sure.
There has to be vision and get aligned on on those things. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is it's somebody else. It's somebody else, or it's a bunch of people that are depending on being told by somebody else what they need to do to improve all the time. That's a tough position to be in, right? As a leader or whatever else, or as a coach. It's not an impossible one, but it's a tough one. But in this case, it's a bit different, because what you have is a bunch of coaches, and you have a visionary who sort of put some stuff together, and those guys saw that vision and like, no, I see this vision, and there's this much more to it. And even the guys behind the vision are going, dude, I hadn't even thought of that. Like, you're totally right. And who else do we need to have on the team to potentially push that thing down the road even further?
Just to amplify it. Yeah.
And that's the right word. That's the right word. Yeah. It's like, 100%. How do you amplify it? It's interesting.
I think we've been very fortunate as a group to have a vision or starting concept, and a bunch of men at this point that have bought in and ran in the direction without some even having to be told. Because I don't even know at the beginning, I knew the direction. And so I think as people started coming in, it was a unified group, and then it's just snowballed.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think that what Joe said, but what you were saying, the amplification of it with these different concepts is like, really, how can this grow? And, I don't know, everybody listens, like, it's not like we're I can't think of the saying, but anyway, we think we're the bee's knees. But I very much believe we've done a great job of making an impact. And I don't even think we're close to stopping. We're not even at a point. I think we're moving so fast that we're doing a good job of, hang on, let's be really good at this. Let's be really good at this, really good at this before anything else happens, right? And making sure that we're at a level that we can provide the relevancy, the performance, and our team together as a whole is the experts on what we're putting out.
Oh yeah.
I appreciate this conversation, guys. It's interesting. I mean, I think like from a podcast perspective and kind of where I fit into the podcast thing, I often go into conversations not knowing exactly where they're going to go, but I have goals, in those things in terms of extracting a certain amount of information and sharing it out there because I've gotten some good information about this person or, through this person or whatever. And like the guests on the show, like let's have a conversation and let's maybe try to hit some things that people haven't heard before. In this particular podcast, man, I've had more discovery, like of things I didn't even expect about a lot of things. Actually, we're obviously talking a lot about IEP, but about a lot of things and how to think about training going forward, team building, how to push things forward, giving people autonomy to contribute rather than just do it, right? And what a contributor actually looks like, what a driver looks like. And kind of where people fit into the team and the expertise that they can bring to it. In the IEP business, but also in other businesses, in my relationships in life. I'm just thinking back on, fuck, man, am I limiting myself? Like, what have I missed? There's probably a bunch of shit right under my nose. And if I just let somebody kind of have the reins a little bit and do it, I could do so much better. So this has been a really cool conversation for me. My head's spinning a little bit. And I'm a little afraid to ask any more questions because then I'll probably get into the rabbit hole. So I'm going to time this out.
Yeah.
I'm going to time this out. Plus, it's been a really long day.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, I'm fucking hungry.
Yeah,
I probably need some water.
Yeah. I think going forward, when it comes down to the students come to the class, we've said this before, we've been moving our whole life, but who wouldn't want to move better?
Sure.
And every opportunity that we get to do something better, let's just try to, I guess, hit that ceiling. But
yeah, whether it's fitness, firearms, business, life, relationships, whatever else, man. Joe, I mean, so tons of insights today. Again, you ninja'd my fucking brain. Just like you did. Just like I saw you did a couple other people. And, spending time with you has been great. I appreciate you taking time out today to have this conversation. I would love to do this again with you sometime. I have questions maybe about some other things that we could get into, certainly on the fitness side of things and on the shooting side of things and some of your experiences / lessons.
Yeah.
And lessons, sorry, not / lessons, but and lessons, things that you've learned along the way. So I am doing it now. I am reserving the right, and I'm going to make you promise me that we'll do this again sometime when we're not in the hotel lobby.
Yeah.
And we can do it in a little more proper way. Jake, as usual.
Yeah, man. Always enjoyed it. Seriously, dude. We appreciate you a lot.
No.
You've made a big impact in the company. As I tell every class with you guys, respect you at the highest level, and I believe that I appreciate more than anything you guys out there leading from the front.
Yeah, man.
And I know Scott feels the same way.
Yeah,
and
man.
so, thanks for coming on and talking with us.
Like I always tell you, it's easy to do something you believe in. So
Yep.
thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you guys.